Welcome to Cut to the Crypto, brought to you by Unstoppable Domains. I'm Tony Karen Brown, and I'm your host. This is your 15 minutes of crypto, asked and answered. Hi, today I'm joined by Gian Volpicelli. Gian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Tony.
And am I correct in thinking that you're coming to us from London?
I am in London indeed. I mean, East London to be exact.
Very specific. And Jan is a senior writer at Wired, where you cover things like cryptocurrency, decentralization, politics, and tech regulation. Just some of my favorite topics, actually. So this is perfect.
I picked them with wisdom.
You're also going to have to teach me one day how you get people to read about tech regulation. That's a topic for another day, but that's a hard one.
Well, let's say that it's at the bottom of my list for a reason, right?
So let's dive right in. There's another word, or I should actually say there's another 3-letter acronym that has been mentioned a lot recently within the crypto and Web3 space, but also it has made some headlines in mainstream media. And that word is DAO, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And I thought maybe it's worth just starting by doing somewhat of a definition of it, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, and you might even have a better definition for us today. But in my understanding, a DAO it's an entity, it's a community. Very important is that there's no central leadership. It brings together people that have a single purpose or a North Star. It's governed by the actual community, which is really interesting. It's fully autonomous and transparent, and decisions get made from the bottom up. And I think the last point to add to what a DAO is, it's organized around this specific set of rules that's all enforced on the blockchain. Have I missed anything in that definition, or is there something to add to that, Jan, from your perspective?
No, I think you captured the spirit pretty well. I would add that a DAO is, as you said, it's autonomous because it's governed by smart contracts, right? So
yeah.
I don't know where you have already spoken about smart contracts on this specific program, but these are self-enforcing routines in a way, like which are based on blockchains. So the idea is, think about it as if you were thinking of vending machine.
Yeah.
So a vending machine is programmed to drop a bottle of Coke every time you insert a coin. So that's essentially the idea behind smart contracts, that if you carry out a certain transaction in crypto, something in the blockchain itself will be triggered, and it will usually carry out an economic operation, like providing a service to a possible customer. And so DAOs are autonomous because the operations are carried out through these kind of smart contracts, usually several of them.
Yeah.
And so every kind of business operation is run by these routines almost as a natural process.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there you go. I think we've briefly mentioned smart contracts, but like everything in a new space, it's worth revisiting these terms and getting new explanations. I really appreciate that. And actually tied to this, like many things in the crypto space, terms seem to have become very popular in recent months, although they've probably been around for a handful of years. And I think that's what's happening with mainstream media. We're starting to get used to these terms a little bit more. And actually, I read that the first formal DAO, called the DAO, was actually formed in 2016. So quite a handful of years.
Shortly before Brexit.
Shortly, but oh yes, Brexit. That when
really,
times
like a week before or a week after that.
Oh, well, there you go. That's wow. Isn't it interesting how that, for me, during the Brexit times, I can't tell you that I ever brought up crypto or DAOs. My mind was very much in all Brexit land. But actually tied to that, so even though the first DAO, the DAO, was formed in 2016, the concept and organizing model has been around for even longer. And so I think there's 2 DAOs that are worth bringing up, and then let's dive into the question at hand today. Most recently, we had a DAO that made a handful of headlines, which was the Constitution DAO, which had the main aim of buying the US Constitution. Worth sharing, I think, a couple of facts here just to showcase the magnitude of it, which was it was a group of 17,000 people that pulled together or crowdfunded over 46 million in the aim of purchasing an original copy of the US Constitution. They ended up being outbid. put that aside. But that is one first example.
It is interesting that the person who had bid them was, I think, a hedge fund manager or something like that.
Why is that interesting?
Well, traditional finance winning over
over a new organizing model.
Yeah, the DeFi or fintech, whatever you want to call it.
Which, look, just goes to show that even all of this is happening and it's in our ethos right now and we're talking about it, it's going to take time for us to adapt, or it's going to take time for it to become the main way of crowdfunding, for example. I like that. And then there's the second one where I think we're getting into the meat of things is with recent geopolitical events, we've also heard more about DAOs as an organizing principle. So a couple of days after the invasion of Ukraine, the official Twitter account of Ukraine tweeted this sort of string of letters and numbers, and these were addresses to a few of their cryptocurrency wallets accepting donations. And I think less than a week later, they had something like 48 million worth of crypto. And so this got me thinking, Gian, if initially DAOs were created to buy something together, to pool our resources and to buy something unique, can they and will they potentially replace things like charity, crowdfunding, or traditional systems of governments and organizing? And maybe another way of asking this question to you is, what is the potential promise of DAOs within politics and governments? How should we be thinking about this?
I'd say that it has been quite an interesting transition, because when DAOs were first floated as an idea, they were first kind of conceived, they were seen as a way to remove managers from the equation, because you don't need a manager, you just have a routine, you just have a smart contract carrying out whatever a manager would do. All the members of the DAO who hold some kind of token, they used to vote on decisions in specific cases. But most of these decisions and most of the business operations are carried out by the smart contracts. So the idea was this would replace companies, any kind of company, from Uber up to, I don't know, Procter & Gamble. Of course, over time, but already initially, the idea was, the easiest way to implement this is doing what the DAO in 2016 did, which was a venture capital fund, right?
Yeah.
So they raised a lot of money. They raised a lot of money, and they were supposed to use this kind of routines, this kind of votes, this kind of smart contracts to invest into various crypto businesses. Because the easiest thing you can do with this model is just raise a bunch of money and then reinvest it.
Yeah.
But over time, as you wisely outlined, it seems to be more like a Kickstarter. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business. It's just we raise a lot of money and then we use it for X. X can be, in a certain case, buying the constitution. It might be, as another DAO recently did, buy an NFT. Buy something in order to fund Julian Assange's legal defense, which the Assange DAO did with 50 million. Or might be something like funding the Ukrainian military effort, as the Aid for Ukraine DAO is trying to do. The idea is that this would still be guided by the principles of transparency, because the routines, the procedures governing these organizations are readable as code. Of course, you have to know how to read code, and even the code is not necessarily always doing what it says it does on the can. Second, of course, it's kind of distributed governance. And so, token holders vote on certain decisions. And third, I suppose, you're kind of a shareholder, right? So your tokens become more valuable the more important the DAO grows. So, these specific cases we mentioned, I suppose that the value of a Constitution DAO token, the internal token they issue to all the members, would have grown in value had the bid been successful, right? Because they would have been equivalent to like a share, like a private equity share in a piece of the Constitution.
Yeah, which makes sense.
So it has just evolved. It started as a kind of let's replace Procter & Gamble and Apple and Uber, and ended up being let's replace Kickstarter, or let's fund political causes because it's easier.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because there's something here that I find interesting that we talk a lot about in tech, this idea of the unintended consequences. And so over the past couple of years, when I was doing some research about crowdfunding websites and platforms like GoFundMe, I hadn't realized just how much GoFundMe, for example, had become one of the main ways for families to seek to pay medical bills. And actually, the CEO of GoFundMe told CBS News, I think it was a year or two ago, that 1/3 of all donations on the platform went towards healthcare costs. And he said something that has stayed with me for over these years, which is we're going to be, this is the CEO of GoFundMe was saying, we're going to be the world's largest healthcare company that isn't actually a healthcare company, which is absolutely insane to me, that something like GoFundMe that started off of just like, we're going to crowdfund a couple of $100, $1,000 to do a project and to see something come to light, has basically become like this medical healthcare system. And that is definitely for me an unintended consequences. Do you foresee any, and I know that's a really hard question, but do you foresee any unintended consequences with things like DAOs and this new organizing model, specifically in politics?
Well, I mean, let me let me answer in two ways.
Yeah.
First, I'll give you an easy answer, which is, I mean, DAOs can always be hacked. We know
Yeah.
that. We know from the DAO hack
Yeah.
in 2016, the company that was formed was eventually hacked, and they lost a lot of money, and they almost brought down the whole Ethereum blockchain with it. So it's not necessarily true you can always trust the code.
Yeah.
Or you can make the case that code is low. So if the code allows for the funds to be drained, that means the actual purpose of the DAO was to be essentially robbed. It was designed to be robbed. That was an argument actually advanced, put forward in those days. That,
okay.
Yeah, there was no theft. There was just using
it was
the
meant
code.
To be. Okay.
Right. Of course, I mean, the other downside is that when you start getting into funding causes and politics, political causes, I mean,
Yeah.
It can very easily go badly, right? So
Yeah.
I think actually that people like former White House strategist Steve Bannon has been looking into something similar. He has been thinking about raising capital by selling tokens, or at least issuing tokens. And so all the kind of unsavory projects and political causes we can think of are likely to
happen
using the DAO, because otherwise it just go through a conventional funding mechanism. Of course, on the other hand, it might be desirable in some countries or in some cases that there is a kind of layer of pseudonymity or anonymity, if you are careful, in order to donate to those causes, and then create a kind of treasure chest, for war chest for political causes that might be under threat, or might be happening, political groups that might be operating in a authoritarian or even like totalitarian context.
Do you think it's a right or a wrong way of thinking about this, as I'm listening to you, is this going to lower the barrier to entry to get more people involved in politics? Or do you think it's just going to get different people involved in politics? Or do you think it's going to get more of the same people involved in politics in just a different way?
Right. So I'd say that what I've kind of seen by covering this is that most people tend to get into to become members, or to donate, or to become coin holders, token holders, tend to be already pretty much crypto pilled, I'd say. They swallow the red pill of crypto, or the orange pill of crypto. So maybe what DAOs, what these kind of organizations, DAOs are not the only way to do that, but DAOs, of course, offer more transparency, and again, another further layer and more kind of democracy, theoretically, that might attract a certain crowd of crypto millionaires that usually maybe wouldn't think necessarily about donating to a political cause or a political party. So it certainly brings in that set. I'm not sure whether it will necessarily appeal to to the general population in the same way. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe because, of course, again, crypto is becoming more trackable every day, right? So saying that this is anonymous is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
But again, if done correctly, DAOs can be a vehicle for adding anonymity if you want to be involved in projects, political or otherwise, that you necessarily don't want to be linked back to you. And that might be desirable in some contexts.
Yeah.
So I'd say it might appeal to usual political activists who are tech savvy enough to do that and value those properties we have enumerated.
Yeah.
And it certainly will bring in more crypto-pilled people who might not be as political in normal circumstances, but now see an easy way to get engaged.
I appreciate that answer. It's, again, as someone who worked in campaigns and the digital side of politics, it was always interesting to me of, do new platforms, new tools, new technology, does that bring in more people? Does it actually lower the barrier to entry? Or, is it the same people who are always interested in politics who just change their way of engaging in politics? Gian, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tony. See you soon.
See you soon. And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for sticking around to the end, and I hope you enjoyed today's guests as much as I did. If you've got big crypto questions, send them our way and we'll attempt to get them answered for you. And for the more seasoned crypto investors and enthusiasts, do go check out our weekly podcast, The Unstoppable Podcast, to learn more about the latest innovations in Web3, NFTs, and the decentralized web.